I believe that people determine their own happiness. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, but let me explain first. So many times I've seen someone walking by me in the hallway in the morning, looking like they are having an awful day. Maybe they spilled their coffee everywhere and it made them late. Or maybe they just received an old test back and got a bad grade. Whatever it may be, their attitude is the only thing that is holding them back from turning the day around into a good one. When I say that people determine their own happiness, I mean that being happy isn't just a feeling, but an actual choice, a decision you must make. If you continuously think about all the bad things that have happened to you, like that bad test grade or your spilled coffee, there's no way you'll be able to forget about them and move on. Only once you decide to let them go and focus on the future rather than the past, then you can start to be happy. Some of these themes have even appeared in the works of literature we've analyzed this year. In A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini, Layla and Mariam both struggle with finding their happiness. For Layla, the death of her family was tragic, but for weeks after that had happened, she wasn't able to let it go. She continuously thought about her family and how much she had missed them, which didn't make her time at Rashid's house any easier. Now, of course, Layla was in some different circumstances from the typical person, but she still did what most people would do, refuse to move on. For Mariam, the situation was somewhat different. For years on end, most of Layla's life, Mariam did not attempt to change her fate. She went years enduring Rashid's emotional and sometimes even physical abuse, like forcing her to chew on rocks. Despite these trying circumstances, they still found happiness in their relationships with their children, Aziza and Zalmay. Doing their daily chores were no longer miserable when they had Aziza and Zalmay there for company and to brighten their day. If Layla and Mariam could do it, having suffered the numerous deaths of loved ones, abuse, and rejection, then someone who is having a bad day due to some spilled coffee can change their attitude to make their day a good one. We see this theme again in Beloved by Toni Morrison. When Paul D first learns about Setha trying to kill her children, he is appalled and confused at how she could do such a thing. He even says to her, "You have 2 feet, not 4," implying how animalistic her actions were. Either way, in the end, Paul D realizes how happy he was with Setha, and after Beloved leaves, chooses to forget the past and return to 124. Another example appears in The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, when 2 teens, Hazel Grace and Augustus, were faced with terminal cancer, giving them only a few months to live. Despite their limited time together, they managed to make light of the situation, cracking jokes about their cancer throughout the novel, and eventually fall in love. Even knowing that soon one of them would be dead, they didn't let that or anyone else ruin the time they had left together. One example of this is during their trip to Amsterdam, where Hazel Grace first learns that Gus's cancer is back, and when they meet Peter Van Houten, their favorite author who ends up being a complete jerk to them. Nevertheless, they persevere and manage to have a great time anyway. And lastly, in The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, at the very end of the novel, the main character, Nick Carraway, decides to leave the disillusioned New York City and go back to home, where he's happy. After the death of Jay Gatsby and the betrayal of Daisy and Tom, he actively decides to leave all that has happened behind him and go back to the Midwest. He even describes his home as the warm center of the universe, where he is at his happiest. Although the situations these characters are in are different from what the average person in Seneca encounters, they communicate my point. Every single person has events that happen to them, whether they can be life-altering or just a rough start to a day. But one thing does not need to ruin your day or your week. I know this from my own personal experiences. I've dealt with my fair share of obstacles, and each and every time, the same thing works to pull me out of my slump. Only once I've accepted the past can I finally move on with a positive perspective. It's crazy how a simple change in attitude or taking matters into your own hands is all that it takes to change things. So the next time you've spilled your coffee or think you're having a bad day, think of Layla, Mariam, Paul D, Nick, Hazel, or Gus. They were in much worse situations than most of us could imagine, yet that didn't stop them from changing their fate. Happiness is a decision that is up to you, and this is what I believe.